Good morning. I hope you guys are having a great morning, a great start off to this week. I'm Jenny Remsberg.
And I'm Chrys Howard. And yes, this month our new series is called, what are we calling it, Jenny?
We're calling it A Call to Action.
A Call to Action. I love that because we're speaking about our teens and what we need to be doing as the adults in teens' lives, and not even just teens, even younger than that.
That's right.
I said last week
students.
I was on a trip last month with my 10-year-old granddaughter. She and I, it's rare with 11 grandchildren to get away with just one of them, but I did that. And, even at 10, almost 11, she's already way into texting everybody and messaging. And, it's just a different world.
It is.
So we are, last week we spoke with Lee Taylor and loved our conversation with him, speaking to how we can be involved in our teens and children's lives in a positive way.
Yes. And all the things that students are faced with.
Absolutely.
So that runs us perfectly into our little segue there into our guest today. Our guest today is Tim Coates, who is no stranger to the cross. He is actually one of the original founders, one of the ones that began this great work up here, and he's kept his hand in it and his heart in it and his prayers in it, and just a great force. He's been a great force in the area for students of all ages and in all stages. That's one of our phrases, but that would be Tim Coates for sure. So I want to introduce him, Tim Coates, and welcome him to It's a Mom Thing, and let him tell us a little about himself.
Well, good morning, Jenny.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Glad to be here.
We're glad you're here.
And what a great way to start off the week. Mm-hmm. You talked about students and kids, and yes, pretty much my life has been involved about for many, many years. We were in here talking a few minutes ago about, who I was and kind of like a bio, and I don't like to think about bio. It sounds like something medical.
No, just a little bit. Are you from this area originally?
I'm from this area.
Okay.
To go way back to my beginnings, I was actually an adopted child. I was left abandoned in New Orleans, and I was adopted by great Christian parents.
Wow.
Lived in Rayville from up until I was 21 years of age. Met a long redhead girl from West Monroe. Fell in love. Several years later, we got married. Been married to the same one since 1975.
All right.
Accepted Christ at a young age of 12, First Baptist Rayville, and we moved over here. Changed, did the letter change to Ridge Avenue Baptist Church in '78. And was a part of the student ministry for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. Of course, we dabbled in kids and pre-babies and everything else in the world. But I was student pastor there for a long time, and under some other guys who nurtured me. And I had a lot of influences in my life. I had a lot of great people who showed me the way. Particularly my mother. She made sure that my tail was sitting in a pew in church. Mm-hmm. That I got involved. And I look back to my younger years, to where there was a guy. We didn't have youth pastors back in the day.
No, we didn't.
But there was two guys who was highly influential in my life. So I know about what mentoring really means.
Right.
And to have a godly man involved in your life, even though my father was, there was a guy by the name of Jim Adams from Rayville and Dr. John Hooks. Jim Adams seems to be my Sunday school teacher forever. And Jim spent time with about 4 or 5 of us because it was a fairly small church. And we spent a lot of time together. He was a pilot. He had an agricultural service in Rayville. We flew a lot. We had fun together. We went to the took we went bowling. He took us hunting and all kind of fun stuff together. So I knew what a godly guy looked like in my life,
Right.
And as I got older, my dad was kind of like a gentle giant. He did things in a quiet way, and I never knew all the stuff that he did until after he passed away. And I look at those two great guys in my life, and I says, I need to give back. And I started looking for things, and God eventually led me into student ministry to give back from what was given to me as well too. So it's been an interesting journey for me. I was highly involved in student pastoring and in college ministry, young adults. I've done a little bit of everything. I got a call about 5 years ago to actually start a college group at a different church, which I did. And then I kind of worked myself out of that, and I'm actually the care pastor at Life Church in West Monroe right now. So everybody says, what does a care pastor do? And I says, things that the pastor doesn't want to do or doesn't have time to do. That's what a care pastor does. Do a lot of hospital visits and some hospice and some weddings and unfortunately some funerals as well too. But I talk to a lot of people and I just show them that God cares and so do we. So that's what a care pastor is. And I'm involved in our student ministry as well too. And I, back up our youth pastor or our children's pastor if he needs to. So I wear a lot of different hats, and it's always around kids or around students.
It sounds like it.
So you also have You haven't talked about your offspring.
Oh, you mean my wife or my son or what?
Oh, your son and then the...
No, the grandkids.
Come on now.
Well, yeah, you know,
What
since it is a mom thing. Yeah, my wife and I were blessed 30 years ago with a boy, and I had the pleasure of marrying him and his wife Alicia back in 2007. We have 2 beautiful grandchildren. We have one very sassy 3-year-old named Peyton, and we have a new one called Carter Beckett.
Oh.
And he's just, you know, the first time I saw him, he had on camo, and I said, it's my kind of guy. You know, so I fell in love with Carter, you know. So
Precious.
we go over there. They live in Bossier City. They're actively involved in Simple Church, who's pastored by Justin Hagler, who's an old youth pastor of mine from First Baptist Bossier. So we're all kind of congruently connected in a lot of different ways, you know. So from, you know, Brad's got a hold of the Simple Church thing. They do small groups and have a lot of good friends in that church. So, you know, I'm kind of passing it on to him as well. Yeah.
And I want you to just also mention about how you also, in the midst of all of these other things, besides your full-time job, how you also mentor young youth pastors and pastors. Like, you have a whole group.
Well, yeah, I don't have as many as I used to because they're all good.
Maybe not actively, but they all use you as a resource.
Yeah, I've been in youth pastoring for a long, long time, and I got shown some great examples. And let me just give a plug out to a lot. This area is absolutely phenomenally blessed by youth pastors and churches that empowers youth pastors to do what they need to do. You don't have to go approval. If God sends you, just do it. You've been commissioned. You don't need my permission. I can think of some top ones like Family Church or Christ Church or First West. I can think of McClendon. I can think of a lot of different churches that just come to mind. Whites Ferry Road Church of Christ. It's just 3 blocks from the house. You know, just do amazing things with the students that they have there.
Right.
You know, and I'm old enough now at the age of 59 to have seen students who came through my ministry who are now youth pastors at Life Church in Oklahoma and senior pastors at other churches too.
Right.
So I'm blessed to see seeds come to life and flower and grow and lead others. It just tickles me to death. You know?
So in the same vein of thinking in that, because what you've done is plant seeds throughout your whole entire life.
Right.
You began to see a need around here.
Right.
Because it is your heart to want to pour out into people. From the first time I met Tim, because obviously I worked here at the Cross, and Tim was always a huge support to me when I didn't even really know what I was doing. But I want to speak to, now that we know kind of who you are, I want to speak to where you are these days and what you've seen and what that translates to.
Well, let's go back, just say to last year or year before last. And we had a huge, sad, and it's hard to think about it and even talk about it, but we had a huge teen suicide problem in the Ouachita Parish that brought national attention. There was a guy that I didn't really know. I knew him because he was a youth pastor, but I didn't know him personally. But we did have a mutual contact in Leslie Lamb. And Leslie knew a guy named Larry Roy. And she threw me an idea, and I've always had this passion and this idea to do something like this. So we met at Chili's. I had my Cajun pasta, Alfredo chicken, as I usually get sitting in the corner.
Got a little commercial going there.
Yeah, and we sat, you know, it's kind of like those things, you know, certain places and certain times, kind of like Chris Tomlin says, I know the tree where I accepted Christ and I drove my stake in the ground, and I go back to that thing to remind me of how God's been good to me and to where I planted my seeds.
That's right.
So I remembered where things started, and we came up with the idea of Teen Christian Ministries Live. We call it TCM Live right now, and that's at tcmlive.com as well. On the internet, Facebook, Google, Gmails, Twitters, Tumblrs, you know, everything in the world that we're socially connected, because that's where our kids, even as young as 8 and 9 years old now, are connected through these social media things.
That's right.
Which are a great means of getting out words and events and staying in communication with people, finding lost friends, whatever. But they do also have a dark side where, you know, there's bullying that's taking place, there's threats that's being taken place, there's this sexting thing that's going around that's like a craze that we deal with at TCM Live. And Larry had the vision. I had something in my mind that there's something else as far as student ministry we needed to do, and somebody needed to get involved in something. And Larry had this vision of this thing that eventually involved in the TCM, where he and Larry, Leslie and I sat down and we talked about this thing of doing some kind of a broadcast thing. We didn't have a lot of money to pour into it, and we wanted to know how could we reach teenagers. I was also involved for about 6 years at a thing called Church Online, that is through lifechurch.tv in Oklahoma. That's the biggest church there is in the world. And they have, I forgot how many campuses now, 25 or 30 campuses, but they reach 3.5 or so million people a year.
Wow.
Okay, that's broadcast around the world. So I got with them, and eventually we involved into the platform that Church Online uses, where it has active chat going along with the video broadcast, and we can actually interact with the people that they're watching this video on. And we deal with things like suicide, drugs, homosexuality, cutting, misuse and abuse, spousal abuse, children abuse, runaways,
And this is
anything
live
you can imagine. Yeah.
interaction.
We did the program initially live, and then we had Larry and Leslie that are the host and the co-host. I've done an episode, but we also have people like Sean Hornsby at First United Methodist West Monroe, and Chris Trombador, who's at First West, and Seth Williamson, who's a youth pastor in the area too, and all these other people that have come on board after this initial meeting. So we have a wide variety. We never talk about beliefs unless it's Christ and God and Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Denominations just don't matter to us. I don't care.
Right.
That's what it's supposed to be about in the first place. And it's amazing to how God has blessed this ministry. We got a huge endorsement just 2 weeks ago from Saddleback Church. Kirk Johnson, who's a student pastor there, ran across us somehow because Rick Warren's son, committed suicide.
Right.
And we wrote a letter from us to them about our sorrow for this, and that we're on the front lines with you. We're partnering with you. We're praying with you. Rick Warren's wife read this letter and says, "Hey, we need to check these people out." So she sent Kirk to find us, and I wouldn't doubt tomorrow if Billy Graham doesn't call us on the phone. I mean, this thing has grown to where we do these weekly broadcasts, and then we archive them so people go back and look at them later. But we deal with things just such as drugs and sexting. But these students are so open and they're so real that we talk to us live on chat in our live chat room. We also have a little button on the side that if you want to talk with somebody one-on-one, we call it live prayer, and they can hit a button, and one of our trained staff members, including myself, can go in a private room just like you and I are talking, or Chrys and I are talking, where it's private and everything.
Right.
So we can, and they just open down the walls that they tell us of, I missed my dad, I don't have a dad, I don't have a mom, and all this stuff is just hurt and is dark to a lot of people that they don't know. But I saw this trend kind of growing back years ago with I call it the breakup of the American family. Satan has got his stronghold in breaking up families.
That's right.
And unfortunately, through divorces or through actions, and a lot of innocent people get hurt. And kids need their fathers. They need their fathers to tattle them when they're wrong. They need to use their hand, because God disciplines the ones He loves. We should do the same with our children. Not beat them with a 2x4, but pat them on the butt when they're good and tattle them on the rear when they're bad, you know, and show them God's love.
That's right.
Over a period of time, my dad whipped me one time when I was 10. That's the only time he needed to whip me. I whipped my son when he was 9 one time. I've never had to whip him either, but it got my attention that he knew that I care, and it's harder on us than it is on them. But I see all these issues that teenagers are facing out there, and it's really hard to deal with. A lot of things we can deal with from a biblical standpoint, and sometimes we just don't know how to deal with them. So we've actually got people that have come on board with us that says, we love what you're doing, we applaud what you're doing, how can we help? So if you go to tcmlive.com, we've got a whole list of resources pages from the Pregnancy Resource Center all the way down to people at First West or with Dr. Kirby's agency that says, hey, what do we need to do to help and partner with the thing? Because this thing is bigger than most people ever imagine in this area. I would say probably 1 out of 3 teenagers in this area is affected in one of these things that we've talked about in some form or fashion, or they have a very close friend that is related to them. But the whole thing comes down from the lack of biblical training of bringing up a child young, showing them God's love, getting them actively involved in church. And sadly, I've seen some drop out of church when they get to the college level, but I've seen so many come back, and that's scripturally sound. You bring them up, they're going to come back.
In Jesus' name.
And I've
that's
seen
what it
that.
says. The word says it.
Probably my, and let me just use his name, Kyle Sullivan, who was one of my students there. Kyle was a heathen in high school. He wiped out trucks. He did all kind of crazy stuff. Now he's a youth pastor to one of the largest churches in the world. God could do amazing things if you just give him the opportunity.
Absolutely.
That's it.
You know, and he's been through stuff, and his testimony is what is Kyle's biggest plus.
Well, absolutely. I love hearing redemption stories like that, and having been a former school teacher, you know, and now getting older, now I get to see all that too, where they come back and their lives are turned around. I just totally love that. Well, for me, I have not heard of TCM, so this is just great information for me. And I know for our listeners out there, this is a great opportunity for you to become aware of something that's available now to our teenagers and who are struggling in any way, just a way to connect.
You know, youth pastoring is not babysitting by any means. I don't know of any unactive youth pastor. There's an area that, because we're just, like I mentioned before, so incredibly blessed to have so many dynamic churches that pastors and churches pour resources into getting full-time youth pastors.
That's right.
80% of youth pastors in the United States as of 2012 are either volunteer or part-time.
Wow.
And I'm surprised to hear that still 80%.
Yeah.
But when you think about the majority of church families are not large enough to hire that extra person. And of course, as you said in the earlier segment, when we were growing up, we didn't have a hired person. We had people who worked with us that I still love and value, that they took the time to be with us on a volunteer basis. And for me, I've volunteered for the last 40 years to do what I do with young people. And so those people, hats off and thank you.
They're on the front lines, and I do have to say that you know, even though I've had plenty of offers over the years, I choose to stay in the real world, in the workplace, because I get to hear. I'll never forget this time. It's a little off subject, but I went to get gas for a customer's car one time, and there was a lady who was just bawling and just crying buckets on the other side of the gas pump, and I stuck my head around and I says, "Ma'am, are you okay?" And she just crying, and she says, "No, my husband's been in a bad accident. I've got to get some gas. And I'm not sure he's going to make it. I mean, she was nervous wreck. She was crying. And I says, "Well, what's his name?" And she says, "His name is Herbert." And I says, "Where do you have to drive to?" She said, "I have to drive to Dallas." And I says, "Well, can we stop 2 minutes and let's pray for Herbert?" And I had the opportunity to pray for her. She was a non-believer, and she was mesmerized that a stranger would take the time out to pray with somebody I didn't know.
Right.
And so being in the real world, you get to experience ups and downs. You get to see people in their normal settings. You get to shine a little light in a dark world. You get to add a little salt to the flavor, if you know what I mean.
Right, I do.
And sometimes I have seen some churches, thank goodness not around here too, but sometimes pastors, youth pastors, or people in churches can get complacent inside four walls. Jesus was never inside four walls.
That's right.
He was out. I choose to stay out. I've never let a church, other than to reimburse me back for a cell phone or for a little gas or something, I don't want to be paid. You know, God has done all this for me. I've got to give something back to him, and I don't even come halfway close. So I have chose not to receive payment for this. Use it for missions, fund a student ministry, feed the homeless, do something else with it. God's providing on the other side of the world. I'm okay on this side of the world.
Right.
So that's where I kind of go along with this thing too. But also, you've got to pour your life into other people's kids. And like I was telling Jenny, sometimes I went too far, and my wife had to reel me back in. I was spending more time with them than with me, and I could have easily lost my wife and my family multiple times.
And that is a stigma. I mean, that kind of stuff happens a lot.
We do it so slowly we don't realize it. It's kind of like the drug addict. You start smoking, then you do marijuana, then you do, and it escalates, and you say, "Well, how did I get here?" That's why in pastoring, you've got to have accountability. You've got to have somebody you can lean on. I mean, probably Billy Graham's probably got an accountability partner.
I'm sure. You know? We call that the grip of the gradual.
Yeah, exactly. And it pulls us down. And sometimes, you know, my wife had to tell me, "You spend more time there than here." And I started to realize this. And in Matthew 18, it tells us, if you can't take care of business at home, you got no need being in ministry.
That's right.
Take care of your business and come back to me. Kind of like holding a grudge with somebody. Take care of your bitterness, then give me your offering. Same thing.
Now, Chrys, you had a great question.
Well, first let me speak to this just a little bit too, because having been someone who's always done volunteer work with young people too, I totally believe that is true. That we've got to just keep our families in check first, and never do anything that's going to be detrimental.
Being the head of the
them.
family is priority, next to God.
Priority.
Right. Well, it has to be
because it's so. We're given, if you're a volunteer type personality, you're given so many great opportunities to use that service that you are gifted to do, that you like to do, and none of them are bad. They're all good things.
Right.
But still, we've got to keep our heads wrapped around what has God really called me to be, and that's to be mom and dad first.
Right.
And then we do all the other things that we do. But one thing that I wanted to hear from you is what is that one thing that you think is the biggest challenge facing people working with youth today? And do you think it is that, just keeping your priorities lined up?
Well, that is the biggest thing, because our greatest resource is our children. You talk about safety to a child, you talk about being the parent, that gets moms and dads' attentions, no doubt about that.
Right.
So with that in mind, that's at the top of the food chain, as we say too. Mm-hmm. But you've also got to be willing to take the extra step and be willing to go into the unknown where you don't have any clue, because God will provide you with whatever you need. I am the most unequipped person to do anything in the world. I'll never forget when I got involved with 887. I was, hanging out at the station, and they had a little program come up. Well, it was in the station scraping ice off the satellite dish, because it was sleeting outside, and satellite dishes don't work too good with sleet. And I was hanging around and whatever, and a couple weeks went by until that person couldn't come in, and then the station manager says, "Well, you're it for the night." And I said, "It what?" And it says, "Well, you've got to do the such and such." I don't know how to do such and such, so you grab a microphone, you talk to 10,000 people, and I don't like to talk to 3 people. So that physically changed my life for sure.
Well, hello, right here.
But what it did, it opened a door.
Right.
So when I went deeper into student ministry, whether I'm talking to 5 or 5,000, it's okay. Right. God was equipping me when I didn't even know I needed to be equipped for anything.
Amen.
So when I look back over that, very few people realize the small steps that God has done. But it's just like parent. I've never had a child before. I don't know. God will provide.
That's right.
You learn from your mistakes, and you move on. And you take advice from wise people.
That's right.
Who, because Psalms 1 says to walk in the areas of the wise. Stay away from bad people, because they'll corrupt your character.
That's right. And it's so our heart for this series to be a call to action.
Right.
Because sometimes I still do have kids that are teenagers, and sometimes the challenges that you're faced with, and I realize I'm a single parent too, but the challenges can feel so daunting.
Right.
That I can see how someone who is not plugged in and is not desperate for God to be in the center of things could say, somebody else tag you're it. And how we've got to, as parents and as a community, rise up and take action. Right. And I want you to speak to that.
Yeah. Well, one thing that a lot of students tell me is my mom or my dad or my stepmom or stepdad, whatever, they're too busy.
Right.
Slow down.
That's
Throw
what
the
I'm
cell
saying.
phone in the trash can. Turn off the TV. Your greatest resource is your child. Mm-hmm. You chose to have a child. God blessed you with a child. You need to take care of this child. And you got to sacrifice for this child.
Right.
God sacrificed for us. We're going to need to do the same for him. But they are the priority, and listen to them. I have spent more time. Well, my wife couldn't understand this for a while, but I learned students more by sitting on a couch in the student room on Friday night, just talking for 2 hours, than I ever learned in a Bible study class.
Right.
I spent time with them. They knew that I care.
Right.
And you said the biggest priority with volunteers or whatever too is being real in an unreal world.
Right.
That's the biggest thing. I want to be the same in Super One, the same in church, the same at work, the same walking down the street, the same at Curly Park, the same if I'm out on the river, if I'm in the woods. I want to be. I want to be me. That is where I'm constantly always saying I want to be real. I'm not going to be plastic. I'm not going to be phony.
Right.
And most students understand that.
And that's exactly why you make a difference in people's lives.
That's
because you are the same every place you go.
I try to be.
Kids are so quick to know when someone's a phony, when they don't know.
Yeah.
I always say I learn my best lessons when I'm driving the car and I've got 8 kids in the car and I'm not even saying a word.
Yeah.
They're just, I'm driving them around,
and they know
taking them
if
somewhere.
I'm speaking to students or I'm teaching a class or something, they know if you're prepared or not.
Right. Oh, yeah.
If you go into something blindsided, they're going to say, this is not really important to you. Why should it be important to me?
Right. So today, yes, we are facing some challenges that are bigger than we faced as teenagers. But
Because of the level of accessibility.
That's
to
right. But the
everything.
answer is always the same. The
That's
answer
right.
is still be the parent, be the leader you're called to be, and God is your biggest example in everything. There's
God's order.
His order.
Just putting
Yes.
things in God's order. And it's clear in His Word what His order is.
Absolutely. And so Tim touched on some things that are bigger than we have really discussed, the things that are facing our teenagers today. And certainly in our community, teen suicides have been at the forefront, and we've all been prayerful about that and how we can have an impact. And then cutting and eating disorders and so many different things affecting
And
our
bullying.
teenagers today, and bullying.
With school starting, I mean, this is why
Right.
we're doing this. People, we all need to wake up. We all need to have a call to action and be
Yes.
willing to act.
So what are some things, Tim, that you think that maybe we're not doing, or some are doing, but not everybody, and we all need to get on this bandwagon?
Oh, you mentioned bullying, Jenny, and there's another great thing going on around called Rachel's Challenge
Right.
as well too. I remember when Columbine and the shooting out there that kind of opened people's eyes
Yep.
to this thing too, and then a lot of the people around in the area heard about Rachel's Challenge and bringing it into our schools, which is a phenomenal program.
It is a phenomenal
There's only
program.
certain things we can say in schools about God
Right.
and Jesus and Bibles and different things too, because of the way the laws have physically changed. I remember several years back, I could just walk into high school, high five, and walk where I wanted to go, and that's Tim. He's the youth pastor. Now it looks like you got to go through a screen check and a background check, and you got to
Right.
be asked by a student, and you got to be approved by the Pope and everything else too. So,
Right.
so times have definitely changed. But you get down to some of the practical things that we need to pay attention to. Well, there's a lot of resources out there, and one of the worst things that we're all involved in, and myself included, is just being so busy.
Right.
We're involved, you got soccers and baseballs and footballs and dancing and cheerleading and youth groups, and then you've got this and this too, and then you got studies, and we're pushing the kids faster to an acceleration level.
And all those things are
school.
year-round now. They used to
they're
be-
all the time.
yeah,
It's just so time consuming. When do you have time to rest? When do you have time to breathe? Jesus tells us to give me your weight and I'll make your load lighter. But
That's
we have to
right.
give him control of those things. Like, where is your priority at?
Right.
Is it in dance? Is your daughter going to be a professional dancer? Probably not.
That's my thing. When things come up to me in my own home, it's like, okay, where's God in that?
Yeah, right.
Where is that
Right.
kingdom wise?
Yeah.
We've got to have kingdom eyes.
Sure.
We have got to. The question is, will that matter for eternity? Does that
Exactly.
matter for eternity? In 10 years, what's
Exactly.
that? I mean, and really with so much opportunity for distraction, you got to bring it down to a common denominator at some point.
We all need activities. We need social
Right.
bonding. God made man and woman and told us to multiply
Relationships.
for community.
Yeah.
Exactly. But we've got so many distractions out there now. You don't have time to breathe.
Right.
I have gracefully learned in my upper years to gracefully say no, and I
Right.
don't have to tell somebody why I can't do something, except I just don't have time for it, or I can't fit that into my schedule. My
Right.
schedule may be spending a date night with my wife, going to the movies, or sitting outside on a patio and watching the squirrels eat corn.
Right.
Quality time is valuable.
Chris
Right.
says a lot on It's a Mom Thing, because we talk about this a lot,
Yeah.
busyness,
Oh, yeah.
And she'll say, you can do everything, but just not all at the same time.
Exactly.
That's
We can
right.
multitask, but
Right.
I saw something on Facebook a while back that it had a daughter on a swing set playing, and mom was behind her and she was texting or whatever, and the caption was, "Mom, can you put the phone down and spend time with me?"
Right.
Well, that's basically what we're talking about. And I went, whoa, that was me for years, So I limit my things that I can do, and if I ask myself every time something comes up, does this glorify God? Yes or no? If it says no, I'm not involved in it.
Right.
If it's yes, well, let me see if I can figure it out.
And sometimes, Tim, and Chris, we all know from being involved in ministry for so much, sometimes things can appear godly, and they are
Yeah.
godly, but they're not
Yeah.
of God.
Oh yeah. Let me
Because
take
those things can be the very things that distract you from the things that are of God as your family.
a quote that I'll never forget was impacting on me 8 or 9 years ago. It was by Craig Rochelle, senior lead pastor, founding guy of LifeChurch.tv. We need to say no to some good things to be able to say yes to some bigger things.
That's it.
That's right.
And that's the whole thing.
Right.
You know, the saying, less than God's best is a man-made mess.
Exactly.
I mean, that's another thing.
Exactly.
You know, yes, we do need to say no to some good things so we can be ready for the best. We can be ready for what the Spirit of God is moving us to do.
Yeah.
And I don't think Tim is saying that we drop every activity we're involved in or that our
Absolutely.
kids
Oh,
are
no.
involved in.
We
We don't
need
want to
that
do
in your
that.
life.
Yes, absolutely. And our children need to be trained in different things, but it's that balance, you know, looking for, you know, if we're just so overloaded, we're not breathing, that's too much stuff.
I'll give you one statistic that I knew because I coached baseball and I was involved in baseball for years. Love baseball. Everybody thinks their son is going to be a Major League Baseball player, you know. Now, statistic was, the last one I got was 2011. Okay, if little Johnny is going to play Dixie Youth Baseball or Little League Baseball, the odds of him getting to just a paid baseball player's position, say in Class A, is like $1,200 a month is all that those guys make, is 1 in 275,000. One person, 275,000. Right. The chances of him getting to a major league and playing in one game is 1 in 3.5 million. Your little Johnny is not going to be a professional baseball player. But where can you invest his time into? But it does teach him team sports.
That's
it teaches him getting along with other people, giving and taking, learn to be humble, listen to a coach and discipline. Those are great factors for learning how to discipline your life. It's time for me to read my Bible. It's time for my quiet time. Mom, we need to go to church. Mom, we need to go to church. You know, and all those things have great value, but it can't be the priority.
That's it.
Priority is God. Second priority is your family. Everything else doesn't matter.
And just watching your intensity level, you know, as a parent of a ball player, you know, you know, you just can get yourself so stressed wound up when you're, like you said, the chances are it's not going to happen. And another thing but you can enjoy so many other great benefits
Some
from
of my closest friends are ones that we met playing baseball.
Right.
You know, so it has great benefit to that too, but it can't consume you. That's what I'm trying to say.
And another thing to think about is, do your children ever see you get that passionate and that wound up over the things of God?
Yeah.
What are we teaching by what we're modeling?
Think of this. West Monroe High School, Friday night, 10,000 people. West Monroe's playing Neville, let's just say, for example.
Come on now.
A guy gets a dead cow, a leather ball. He runs down an imaginary field, scores an imaginary point, 10,000 people erupt. When's the last time your church erupted when a student accepted Christ?
That's what I'm saying. What are we modeling in front of our children?
Right. And I'm not knocking football by any means. I was there and I love football.
We love it.
But we're talking eternity. We're talking your child's life. Hello, can I get a good witness in the house?
Come on. I mean, what are we showing them? Where are we getting our hope?
Right.
Where is our hope?
Right.
Why do we have so many kids that are hopeless?
Absolutely. Boy, some great things from Tim Coates today.
We could talk forever.
And, our preacher Jenny over there. Absolutely.
Well, tell us again the website so people can go, please.
www.tcmlive.com. Our video goes up our live chat is at 8 o'clock. Our video starts on Thursday nights. Video starts at 8:30. All of them are archived. All of them are on YouTube. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. You can, they get Jenny and Chris, they can get a hold of me, whatever. We'd love to have you guys partner with us. We've gone to now high definition. Philip Brooks has come on board to do some video editing for us. We've got some old friends, some old ministry allies together, and then the quality is so much better than it was.
What a great resource.
TCMlive.com.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for what you've done in our community for the last 59 years that you've been a part of it.
As Phil Robertson says, Jesus #1.
That's right. We'll be back with you next week, so have a great week.